The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Tēnā tātou katoa, meri kirihimete. It's the Gone by Lunchtime Christmas party, and you're all invited to listen to us. My name is Toby Manhire, and I'm joined by two of the most festive people in the history of this podcast, Annabelle Lee. Hi, Annabelle.
Kia ora.
Ben Thomas. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Toby.
For a Yuletide binge of takes as hot as Prancer's hooves, as brilliant as Rudolph's nose, and as pungent as Santa's pissed-up breath. We were going to talk about the year 2016, a bit about the year 2017, but before we do that, there was a kind of big thing that happened in politics. What was it, 10 days ago or so? I was, if you must know, I was about to send out my sheets to various spin-off contributors reflecting on the year, and one of the questions in it was, do you think John Key will lead the National Party into the 2020 general election? So I clearly wasn't focused on what was about to happen that afternoon, Monday last. Were you, Annabelle?
Absolutely
you
not.
knew it was happening. Winston sent you several texts over the weekend saying
Winston
it's coming.
knew
It's coming.
So, like, he knew before John did.
Yeah, he knows a lot of things. I mean,
he's a matakite.
A matakite. Is that soothsayer?
Yes.
He's got a crystal ball.
I found
crystal
that
balls.
The people saying that they knew John Key were going to step down fell into two distinct camps. One was liars, and the other was people who have been saying it every week for the past 8 years.
So true.
And, John Key must go. There's someone who has a Twitter account called John Key Must Go, who, to their credit, whoever it is, said, well, I'm not sure what I do now. I don't know what I do with this account. And it's kind of interesting that there is a bit of sentiment in some corners of the worldwide internet that people are saying, beginning to convince themselves that he was muscled out, John Key. That he was
all of these
forced
things,
to leave.
start to look inevitable in hindsight, and there's and now within 10 days, the left of New Zealand has sort of convinced themselves that actually they've seen him off. You know, they finally toppled
only
John
if you
Key.
judge the left of New Zealand by some of the websites that you and Hooten spend all day obsessing over.
I have to say, I am in admiration for it was such an elegant exit and so rare that you see, a leader do that. I thought, it was a powerful way to end his reign.
It was gobsmacking. And yeah, now I can't even remember the guy's name. It was John Keys.
This is the enduring mystery, is that the most popular Prime Minister of modern or perhaps all times in New Zealand, and I would say about half of his voters didn't know what his name was. They'd say, I really like John Keys. Well,
they like him because of what Mike Hoskins said about him all the time.
An enigma to the end.
And it's been, Annabelle, we kind of, those of us for the sport of it, enjoying the National Party finally showing a little bit of division, and it was like the dam had burst, and then the dam hadn't really burst that much at all, and it was almost a coronation of Bill English and Paula Bennett.
It's always a little bit embarrassing to watch other people's personal ambitions sort of leak out, come squirting out and spraying all over everyone. and then having to like
Embarrassing but riveting, right? Yeah.
And then having to rebury them and pretend. Oh no, I was just putting it out there just to see, just to feel, not doing numbers, just seeing if there's a vibe or a feeling, a la Coleman and Judith.
Judith Collins, yeah.
But yes, it was quite tidy in the end, wasn't it? But I don't think that it will remain tidy for a long period. I think that we'll start to see some more manoeuvring over the next, or in the new year.
You've been in that world, that snake pit. Ben Thomas is a press secretary for a National Party minister. Is it? Can it hold? Can they retain the famous fearsome discipline?
There's nothing the National Party likes more than being in government. Bill's got the year to win the election. I don't think there'll be any kind of dissent or acrimony. This was a real contest. I think this has been glossed over, because it was sort of this brief, brilliant, effulgent alien flame that no one had sort of recognised. Because Key was such a Key was just such a sort of a truism as the leader, right? And so when he disappeared, there was actually a real competition for the leadership here, but the what we might call the establishment, which is the heir to the throne, Bill English, Joyce, those guys, they swung into action with ruthless efficiency, and they crushed. Well, you wouldn't call it an insurrection because it is actually an open democratic contest, but they took care of business pretty swiftly.
Presumably Judith Collins and Jonathan Coleman, if they were honest, didn't really expect to be elected leader.
Then why would you do it? I think that's the thing about being a politician, is you have to be slightly deluded and think that you can win all the time. Yeah. Otherwise you wouldn't be in it. So I doubt that they'd just throw their hat in the rings if they didn't think they had some sort of chance.
Okay, but what if you're setting out your stall, you're expressing your interest in the job, but you realise that...
Do you need to do that publicly, though? Would you not be doing that behind the scenes?
I don't know. It makes it clear that you're ambitious. As far as Coleman is concerned, particularly, that was never going to happen, right? That just simply wasn't going to happen. But he
that's
now
what
puts
you would
himself on the radar.
I don't think that's the explanation. I don't think it was sort of as a stalking horse for a promotion in the reshuffle. I think he honestly thought he was in with a shot, and I think for a brief period he probably was.
Really?
Yeah. What the post-Key thing showed was there were a lot of emboldened backbenchers, guys that you haven't really heard a lot about before, through the news media, people like Chris Bishop, Todd Muller, talking to the media and quite openly about the idea that there was a bit of a disconnect between cabinet and the backbench. The backbenchers felt like they needed, a bit more expression. And Coleman, probably not anyone's favourite for the job or really even a leading contender, had you asked anyone three weeks ago, harnessed that well, and has probably put himself in a stronger position profile-wise, because I think you're right. If the unthinkable had happened and Jonathan Coleman was the new Prime Minister, that would take a lot of, explaining to the New Zealand people of who this guy was.
Yeah, so he was never going to win.
You'd have to issue commemorative postage stamps, put him on coins like they did in the old days.
You have an emboldened backbench to some extent. Someone who said it, many people, many of the backbenchers who hadn't really realised that they had any power, and that of course they do. The power resides in caucus.
They have one vote, and that's it.
But they have the same number of votes as Amy Adams or a senior minister. But now, you said in British politics, you see all the time in the Tories, the 1922 committee is this incredibly powerful part of the way the dynamic of the party works. They've been dormant here in the past. Backbenchers have had kind of some clout, and now they might feel a bit emboldened, a bit more willing to, internally at least,
and have a mandate as well, because this is a huge caucus, 59 MPs. And many of them, the list MPs, are there because of John Key. Key was the franchise, right? So they owe everything to John Key and the upper echelon of the National Party. It's not like in the old days with first past the post where you won your seat, you've got your place at the table. Everyone there was there in part because of old-fashioned sort of patronage from John Key. So his word was law. Now, without Key there, you don't really have that. No one there was elected to Parliament because of Bill English or because of Jonathan Coleman or because of Judith Collins. And that changes that dynamic a bit.
Right, so here's where you say that the National Party love being in power, want to be the natural party of government. All true. However, those MPs that you talk about have never experienced the polls dropping, really, in any significant way. So they've never thought, fuck, I might lose my seat, really. They've never thought, so if, and this is going to be the real test, if even by 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 points, the polls drop for National in the new year or even this year, then those people start talking. They drop by another 2 points. It's something that they haven't experienced in the key years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, they just haven't experienced it. So what happens then?
That's the irony too, I guess, is that, it's much harder to shine as a backbencher in government than it is if you're on the opposition benches where you can go off and do a bit of homework and find some issue that you can kind of make your mark with. Whereas, all you do if you're on the backbench is ask those sort of pussy questions at question time. Tell me how wonderful you are at your job again. So you're right, Toby. I think that's true. It's something that they haven't had to consider, and they'll be sort of wriggling around on their seats over the next couple of months watching the polls, won't they?
What do you reckon of Bill English so far, Annabelle? He sort of seems to have slid reasonably seamlessly into the job?
Yeah, definitely. And you would expect him to, because he's been in Parliament for like 400 years. And he's considered a safe pair of hands and all of that stuff. But then I remember the other day that sort of housing scandal that he had when he was claiming the accommodation allowance in Wellington, when actually he, had lived permanently in Wellington for ages and all the rest of it. And I think, it'll be interesting because obviously that's a demonstration of poor judgment on his part. So, he's not as pure as the driven snow, but obviously a very competent, minister, a great right-hand man to Key, and so you would expect that it would be a smooth transition.
Ben, he
just needs a personality transplant and he'll be fine.
Well, he read a poem. I thought that was quite cool. I mean, I sort of thought, I mean, part of me wants to kind of make a little joke about it, but it is actually quite cool that he said, and I don't think this was some disingenuous spin manufactured thing. He was at a Women in Leadership conference, heard us in a Tisdale March poem, thought, oh, that's quite interesting, and read a line from it.
The thing is that, you can be good at your job and all of that, but what really matters, and especially at this part of the election cycle, is what you are like on the campaign trail.
Right.
And I'm just not sure that he has the personality, but I mean his brand is Boring Bill, and that will possibly resonate with some New Zealanders, but he'll have to toe a fine line on it, I would think. He's always got Auntie Paula there to jazz it up for him.
Yeah, well that's the idea, isn't it, that it's the kind of yin-yang thing going on, and she can talk about pissing in the shower on More FM or whatever it is, and Bill can talk about fiscal headroom. I don't know whether it quite works
also
like
in the
that.
shower.
It's a novelty Christmas product.
Sure.
I'll send you the link. The thing for Bill though, for Bill English though, Ben, surely is that while he may have been very able on the levers of the economy, yada yada yada, what you don't have to deal with in that role is events in quite the same way. You're not necessarily called on to have a hot take in effect. I mean, John Key is a hot take Prime Minister. And his parting advice to Bill English, which I think he meant sincerely, was trust your instincts. And his instincts are better than anyone's in politics, or probably in the world almost. I mean, he's very good at looking at data, assessing it quickly, and working out, what are the right things to say. That's the test for Bill English, right? It's hard to do that. It's hard to have a hot take on everything that rears its head.
Unless you're Toby Manhire, go.
I think there's two things to that. The first is, Bill, this Bill is boring thing is kind of overplayed. Yeah, he hasn't been a millionaire money dealer overseas. He doesn't have any sort of extreme sports hobbies. But in terms of normal, ordinary New Zealanders, he's not a boring person. He's not a dull, lifeless sort of human being. He's very funny. He's very reflective. He's very he's self-aware, which is something we haven't had in a lot of the other political leaders in Parliament, over the last sort of decade or so. And in terms of, sorry, what were you talking? I got caught up singing his praises.
I was just wanted to say that that one thing that Bill doesn't have, and I've already said it this week, that Key was so good at was like never looking defensive, even when the shit was going down. He always managed to let it slip off, and it's an incredible skill. And really, just a couple of times did you ever see him look ruffled, and it's something that Paula Bennett doesn't have. I mean, Jack Tame kind of eviscerated her very gently this week, and she just doesn't have that same thing, and I think it was really one of Key's most important political skills.
So as a voter and a political watcher, I don't necessarily mind that. I think that the Bill is a lot more reflective. I think you said in your sort of précis of Bill on the spin-off this week or last week that when he's asked a question by an interviewer, he thinks about it and he answers it. Yeah. And that's always been my experience with him as well. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing to re-inject into our politics, to have a question time where the Prime Minister will actually apply himself to answering the question rather than doing sort of glib one-liners, which was very charming when John Key started, but but does sort of speak to a bit of sort of degradation of convention towards the end. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with having a slightly more serious-minded person in the top job who's not necessarily going to give you a hot take on who he thinks is the sexiest woman, but will be available to answer questions about government.
Kind of, it's Mary. He wouldn't use the word sexy, but I mean, the doctor, always the doctor, and not Jonathan Coleman.
And Mary is a hottie, to be fair.
Well, that's your view, Annabelle, and there are a range of views. As John Key would say. There's a reshuffle coming on the weekend, I think. Is it Sunday? Sunday's a good day for a reshuffle. I don't know. What's not much point in us pontificating about that. One of the questions is whether or not his close friend Nick Smith survives, whether or not McCulley survives. Does anyone have any thoughts?
I reckon it won't be like a Las Vegas shuffle. It'll be like when you give a 5-year-old a pack of cards and they just do that kind of gentle... That's my hot take. That's my hot take.
Most of the cards end up in the same place, except one of them is accidentally the wrong way around and kind of bent weirdly.
Yes.
And if you're clever, you can work out that's the Queen of Diamonds, and then later on in the game, you know where it is. Do you follow that metaphor, Ben? It's
wait, who is the Queen of Diamonds in this?
Judith Collins.
Judith.
Right. What do you reckon? Reshuffle?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be major. Sam Lotuainga has announced that he'll be resigning. Heke Parata.
Or Sam Lotuliga, as everyone insists on calling him, wrongly.
That's a pretty incorrect way of.
It is incorrect, but it's pronouncing. It's because the capital I after the hyphen is why they get it wrong.
Gotcha.
Indefensibly, but they get it wrong.
And. So there's some room. There's some room. There's room. He doesn't have to do anything radical in order to provide. There's already a new Prime Minister that'll keep the public's attention.
And I think you mentioned perhaps on one of our rival broadcasting outlets, Ben, was it you? I don't know. That the idea that John Key was this kind of ruthless slasher of cabinet ministers is nonsense. The demotions on the whole were really very few over the course of those 8 years.
I think in 2013 he cut Kate Wilkinson and Phil Heatley, and he said it's not really because they've done anything wrong. We just need a bit of a refresh. And he really kind of coasted on that reputation for quite a while.
It was played as part of the smiling assassin thing. When
very stern. Everyone's on notice. Yeah. You can't trip up as a minister. And of course, over the next 3 years, ministers were like pratfalling all over the place, falling into
by comparison to Helen Clark.
And
Nick Smith got demoted, and Judith Collins got turfed as well. So there were those two. Were there any others?
Well, those were resignations about sort of actual, scandals,
that's right.
and purported scandals. He gained this reputation for a really sort of harsh taskmaster from these two second bench ministers, where he said, there's nothing wrong. We're just looking for top performing, and like I said, he sort of coasted on them in the same way that Stephen Tindall flying his staff to Samoa once, for a Christmas bonus, kind of became his reputation as a businessman for sort of 15 or 20 years or something. Oh, sorry, Dick Hubbard, not Stephen Tindall. Here I am. I can't defame someone.
The spin-off would
rich.
like to apologise to Stephen Tindall. And Dick Hubbard and Winston Peters would definitely like to apologise to Jordan Williams and Colin Craig, just in case anything could be inferred from Ben's tone. Is anyone you'd like to apologise to, Annabelle, before we move on? We're dragging the chain here.
No.
Should we crack on? Let's look back at 2016. Ben, you said a moment ago that you couldn't remember anything from 2016 Monday before last.
Yeah, everything.
Your world has been so shaken.
Everything's just grey.
It's this post-traumatic stress disorder, isn't it?
It seems like a million years ago that John Key was our Prime Minister and I felt safe.
John Keys. Who were your political winners? Who were the champs? Ben Thomas.
Well, the events of the last week have shaken everything up, and I think the result is that everyone is a winner.
Oh, please.
It's like a fucking Kurt Vonnegut clam bake on the beach at the end of a novel. It's like it's like the final scenes of Love Actually, where everyone's storylines have shaken out in a sort of
Cue music,
happy
cue
seasonal way.
Fucking hell.
John Key's won because he gets to spend more time in Hawaii, and he left on top, surprising everyone as he's done his whole career. Andrew Little wins because he no longer has to face John Key in the next election. Bill English wins because he's finally Prime Minister. Stephen Joyce wins, he's Finance Minister. New Zealand First have a new opening in the election. They win. Literally everyone is a winner here, except, as you canvassed before, maybe the last 6 or 7 people on the National Party list might be feeling a little more nervous as Christmas rolls around.
Everyone's a winner, baby. Annabelle, is he right?
Yes and no. My winners would be the Māori Party because they suddenly look like they could be a happening thing again.
Because of the mana partnership or because of the way...
Because of tuku, which means that the mana partnership can happen because it wouldn't have happened without tuku. And, Māori
tuku
politics is all about relationships, and tuku has a good relationship with hone and te ururo doesn't. So they're starting, and we're talking about them again and we're speculating about the seats, whereas before, people thought te ururo would get home and hosed, and that's...
And I guess for the Māori Party, it also sort of offsets it was watching the Q&A panel where Matt McAdam was ribbing Marama Fox, about, you're just their dirty little helpers, which is the main thing that has bedeviled the Māori Party over the last few governments, which is you're just enablers for the National Party, for the Tories.
She's a maestro.
But doesn't the mana thing kind of offset that, because they're clearly to the left of Labour. So it's like, if we can be mates with National and the Mana Party, we kind of...
I don't think it offsets that, to be honest. I don't think it offsets a perception that they are definitely on the right, but I think it's, Māori want to see them working well together because there's, Māori that have more corporate interests, and then there's Māori that are about, te pani me te rawa kore, which is, mana's raison d'etre. So I don't think it's really about signalling that they're going more left. I think it's that they're open to working cooperatively with the other Māori political force and not trying to destroy them and take them down. Marama Fox is such an incredible politician. When she's in front of a Māori audience, she kicks the hell out of John Key and the National Party, but then she does the, hey, but we are at the table. She just knows how to play an audience superbly. She has an excellent relationship with the media. It feels like the most engaged the Māori Party has ever been with the Māori media, and I think, they need her, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens at the election, because, she could well be out of Parliament, and I think that would be a real shame. Hone's a winner. Hone striking up a relationship with tuku, could possibly get back in. He's looking good. The Greens, I feel like they had a really underwhelming... Marama Davidson, again, another really impressive Māori politician. We knew she would be. But I feel like the Greens have had a very quiet, understated year, and I don't know if I'd call them winners this year, to be honest.
No, I think they've been doing quite a lot of sort of gearing up for next year, and they've been working quite harder than the Labour Party seem to have been on recruitment. And while someone like Chloe Swarbrick, who did well in Auckland, is not everyone's cup of tea, they won the fight to get her because largely it looked like they cared about it more. Whereas sometimes Labour give the impression of going, well, you come to us. You come and kiss the ring if you want to be with the Labour Party. And then they've got Hayley Holt as well. So they do have a... Whereas they've now signed up
that's
Lila Hare.
That's the real reason why Key quit. Because Hayley Holt's standing in Helensville.
Well, just to go back to Key and the Māori Party and their year, a lot of attention is focused on, this kind of meta discussion of, their negotiations with mana. But if you actually look at how their year has gone, they've had an extraordinary year. John Key said that one of his 3 regrets on leaving the leadership was that he hadn't managed to create an ocean sanctuary in the Kermadex. Now, the reason that's on hold is because the Māori Party stopped it because there hadn't been adequate consultation with Māori.
No, the reason it's on hold is because Nick Smith and John Key completely balls it up.
yeah, that's right. But instead of just sort of rolling over...
It's not the Māori Party holding it up. It's National ballsing it up.
No,
and the Māori Party having to say, hang on, Taihoa, you guys have to do that, that whole treaty thing.
I'm not saying that in a negative way, but what I'm saying is, look, this was the...
They did achieve something.
Yeah, he got...
I guess.
He didn't get his flag referendum through, and
by
he
holding
also...
it up.
Yeah, if this was...
No, not holding it up, Annabelle, you just told me not to...
No, but what have the Māori Party achieved?
They have managed to ensure that it won't be done without the proper consultation.
Well, to be fair, I don't know if that was a Māori Party thing or the threat of the legal action by Te Ohu Kaimwana. Sure, the Māori Party have played a part, but I think it probably wouldn't have made much of a difference had Te Ohu Kaimwana not lawyered up and been prepared to go off to court and fight it.
No,
and the thing too is what's happened now. There's been no talks, my understanding is. It's actually stalled and nothing has really happened.
Yeah, so. But that means that the fishing rights haven't been infringed on yet. And in terms of the legal action wouldn't have been able to, it was going to go through as an act of parliament. It's still on the order paper. So it was actually the Māori Party withdrawing support. And it was quite an explicit face-off. I think Key decided that he'd put it on hold. It was about 2 minutes before Tururoa was going to address the press. So, look, I think this was an example of them really staring down the government in quite a staunch manner, and the way that you don't really hear about when Labour and Mana are telling the story about how the Māori Party act in government.
More importantly than the Kermadex Sanctuary, I should say that I have stolen a copy of Marama Fox's Christmas song. Only one verse of which I think was broadcast on the television, and I plan to exclusively publish that on the spin-off as Māori Party propagandising by Marama Fox. Who? What about Andrew Little? I mean, Labour Party, treading water, holding on. No one is seriously talking about a leadership challenge. I mean, it's strange that should necessarily be a point in their favour. But where do they fall? They're sort of somewhere in between the winners and the losers.
I just feel like I come on here and just slag off Andrew Little all the time. I'm sick of it, yeah. I don't have much to say, except I think Calvin Davis has done an incredible job. Went and ran all those marathons, raising awareness around family violence, not a sexy issue, but a really important one that nobody else seems to really be engaging in and keeping corrections honest. So I think he's a winner. Yeah. I don't have much to say.
He's had a couple of good years, but then do you think? And then you said that Hone's got a chance. Hone versus Calvin?
Because Calvin is up high on the list, I think Hone could totally run a 2 MPs for the price of one campaign. And he only lost by, I think it was 700 to Calvin. And a couple of days before the election, the Māori Party actively campaigned on, don't vote for us, vote for Calvin. So if that were not to happen, then Hone may get back in. But, Calvin is a really strong contender, and he's had 3 years of building his profile and endearing himself to the electorate. So who knows, it will be a hard-fought race.
Really big win for Labour in Mount Roskill in the by-election, which seems like in the distant past. But should Labour be feeling good going into the new year?
Yeah, look, they absolutely should. I think the Mount Roskill by-election, its significance has really been overstated by everyone. There was never any serious risk of Michael Wood losing that. He was a reasonable candidate who performed well, and
Is he chuffed, Ben? He's your mate, eh?
I wouldn't say mate. I would assume he's chuffed. He's been down there. But I think it's, so people talk about momentum, I tend to think momentum sort of stops over summer as everyone goes to barbecues, The summer effect is very real. You see the Prime Minister's approval ratings tend to go up as the weather gets warmer and people are happier, and they're like, things are going well in New Zealand, right? There's less rain. And, so I'd say it's been a terrible year for Labour up until the last 9 days, and that's given them a real shot in the arm. I would have probably, I admire Andrew Little. I think he's a good leader, and he really has brought the caucus, to kind of heel. But I would have had him as one of the year's losers if Key hadn't resigned.
Interesting. Labour have called for an early election, which is that a double bluff? I'm guessing that's a bit of a double bluff, insofar as if we're calling for one, then you're less inclined to. I'm not sure. I thought Bill English had kind of suggested that it wasn't likely. We were talking before. You said he hasn't ruled it out. Ben, what do you reckon? What do you reckon, panelists? Snap election, March election, June election.
I think a March election would be fantastic
for
for the public.
For the people.
For the idea that nobody's going to campaign or countenance campaigning during the summer break. You get back, campaigning starts in late January. You have six weeks flat tack, and then it's over for the year, and politicians can actually get around to doing something. What we have here with our triennial elections that tend to be sort of anywhere between September and late November is you just waste an entire year, really, of sort of cold phony war, Cold War, posturing and positioning.
Nobody wants to campaign during daylight saving, though.
When do you come back on air? Congratulations, the Hui has been renewed for another season. Hey! When are you back on air? March. Okay, so
March. We've got 40 episodes this year.
So would you, if there was a March election, would you come on? Maybe would all those shows start a bit earlier? They'd have to. You'd have to get your boots on and get working.
You would.
No barbecues
That's
for
why
you,
I'm
mate.
not a fan of an early election.
That's not going to work for me. And your holiday in some opulent beach house in the Coromandel or whatever it is you do.
Over.
You're listening to the Gone by Lunchtime Christmas Party special. I invited Annabelle and Ben to give out any prizes they want to give out. Have you got any awards either of you want to give out for 2016? They're both pointing at each other. They're both pointing to each other and shrugging. They're shrugging their shoulders. Ben, go.
Well, I think as we were talking about before the show, I've been as Jonathan Coleman would have it, I'm a relative millennial at only 38 years old, so I'm familiar with social media, and I was thinking, who are the best politicians on social media, and the ones who get talked about a lot of people like Grant Robertson, who just have a very good tone, or Jacinda Ardern. James Shaw is surprisingly good on Twitter, the Greens co-leader. Judith Collins, of course, is an extraordinary social media native.
Totally right. She's a pure millennial.
Yeah, but one that you didn't seem familiar with, Brett Hudson, who's an otherwise fairly anonymous National Party backbencher. I think he stands in Oharu. Has a pretty good Twitter account.
I don't know if I follow him. Let me check.
And maybe with election year coming up, now's the time to sort of seek out these diamonds in the rough.
Two T's, isn't it?
Brett We were talking about, backbenchers don't actually have a lot of opportunities in Parliament, apart from asking Patsy questions, and this is one way that they can sort of brand themselves and
B Hudson_NZ.
Yeah, I noticed.
Follows me.
Yeah, I noticed a few Simpsons references recently.
Fuck it, I'm going to follow him right now, live. Done. Annabelle, have you got any prizes?
No prizes.
Any booby prizes?
Gareth Morgan.
I was going to do Gareth Morgan.
I know. So was Ben, but then I stole it because I read his sheet before.
Was it
just cause?
No, these were Toby's notes. These are Toby's notes without my
Without your scrawls,
without my annotations and research.
So I wrote, this is a good podcast. This is quality podcast.
Gareth Morgan, because I appreciate
this is exactly how every political well-known rumor in Wellington starts. It's like, I heard it from Annabelle. This is how exactly every fucking rumor in Wellington that starts with everybody just knows starts.
So Gareth Morgan gets the prize from me and Annabelle and Ben for being the kind of cat-loving prize for trying to sound like Trump as much as possible while at the same time denouncing and repudiating Trump. Anyway, that whole prizes section was a bit of a disaster. Yours was fine, Ben. It was fine, but no better than fine. Election year. What are the big issues going to be in the election year?
I think the same ones that we've had over this election cycle:
More
employment, housing, immigration.
What do you reckon, Ben? Anything unexpected?
Poverty.
Yeah, I think housing and the economy / poverty. We don't know what's going to happen with the economy. All the projections are rosy for New Zealand. Everything's looking good. But as of January the 20th, Donald Trump will be the president of the most powerful nation in the world. He's already as president-elect, just about started a war with China over Taiwan and the One China policy. So
just about started.
There are all there's a lot of known unknowns and unknown unknowns still ahead. But I think if things continue along this path, it'll be housing is the huge one. And immigration will be something that has been sort of growing in recent months and will really sort of take full flight next year.
Winston will unleash it.
The New Zealand media is dying for a Trump. They are absolutely gagging to be able to say this person is New Zealand's Trump, the Trump effect.
So on one level, that's trite and simplistic, right? Yeah, I mean it's that kind of is blah blah blah. Trump is that. So on one level, that is simplistic and silly. On the other hand, if it's a genuine wave that's capturing large parts of the developed world, which it is a useful question to ask. Can Winston Peters, Gareth Morgan will try in his own way to be the non-establishment figure. Can Winston Peters be the lightning rod for whatever part of that sentiment does manifest in New Zealand? And I think we're protected from large part from that because of a valve with MMP and blah, blah, blah. But he's going to try. I mean, did you guys hear his interview on the radio this morning on Morning Report about his Pike River mine? I'm going in there. I mean, it was semi-coherent. He was accusing Guy and Espiner of being party to the Great Conspiracy. It was sort of shambolic. It did sound like he'd just woken up, lifted his head from the pillow after a night on the tiles. Not saying he had been, just that's a metaphor, obviously. But the thing is,
isn't it a metaphor for being drunk?
Yeah, it's a metaphor, but I'm saying it's a metaphor that being drunk is a metaphor for the reality. Obviously wouldn't be so ridiculous
of course,
suggest anything like that of a sort of senior politician. The point I'm making is that even though people like me, people like us, sit there and go, oh, this is ridiculous. He just sounds completely balmy. That doesn't matter if he is channeling, and maybe he's done this all the time to some degree, but it doesn't matter. Surely that is the lesson, one of the main lessons, is it doesn't matter if you can go, this is a ridiculous thing to say, this is contradictory, this is not going to be acceptable to normal right-thinking people. Doesn't matter anymore. Nigel Farage, Brexit, Donald Trump, president-elect, doesn't matter. You don't have to be coherent. You don't have to. It's about whether or not you capture a mood. And so that's what he's going to do, right? That's what he's going to do.
I totally agree. And that's what he's really good at. You know, he knows those right buttons to push with people, and he does it, you know, very, very well. So, no, I totally agree with you. And I think, you know, it'll be a big year for him next year.
And he's probably going to end up, irrespective of whether or not he increases the vote. I mean, New Zealand First usually poll lower than they do on achieve on election day. He's going to be, I mean, we're going to get sick of hearing Kingmaker, 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 but he's going to be what I call the Kingmaker, Ben, isn't he?
Is that a metaphor?
Kingfisher.
Look, that's what all the polling suggests. All of the polling up till now has suggested that we were having a runoff between either a national Act Māori Party government and a national New Zealand First government, and this will only help, you know, the recent events will only help Peters. The campaign will help Peters because there is this backdrop. I don't think it's particularly applicable to New Zealand. I think that you don't really have that same sort of broiling status anxiety in New Zealand, and part of that is actually because of housing, which is one of the other things. You know, middle class families don't feel as if they're getting poorer. If they own their own houses, they actually feel as if they're getting richer because of property price inflation, and that wealth effect, you know, is very different from the States where people actually see their assets being worth less. They haven't gotten their pay rises, you know, their cost of living is going up. So I don't think it translates directly to New Zealand. You know, we don't have the same sort of huge levels of immigration in terms of foreign workers in the same way that the UK did, and we don't have any sort of sovereignty issue in terms of, you know, laws.
We've got higher immigration levels than the UK do per capita, much higher.
Yeah, but there isn't that sort of sense. You don't get the jokes about the kind of Polish plumbers.
There aren't quite the same tensions. But isn't what you're saying exactly what you'd expect an establishment elitist to say? Isn't that the fact?
Well, look, if
drain the swamp.
If 2016 has shown one thing, it's that people like me know literally nothing and should never be listened to.
We should really have
that's kind of a general disclaimer
at the start of all these conversations. This is all bullshit.
So, since Brexit, it's been apparent that I have no idea what's going on.
One more quick thing I was going to mention is Auckland. I kind of feel like next year, and you know, lots of the issues that you touched on there, nowhere are they more kind of powerfully felt than Auckland, and you could see that Paula Bennett's Aucklandness was talked about as a factor in her achieving the deputy role over Simon Bridges. Matt McCartan is now in Auckland, and there were various theories about whether it is, but that does seem to be, in large part, driven by a focus on Auckland. We're going to have a Mount Albert by-election in Auckland. Auckland Central's up. I mean, Auckland is going to be big, right? And I'm speaking from Auckland, but Auckland's going to be big in 2017. Or is that another elitist establishment thing to say?
Well, up until now, a lot of the focus has actually been on the regions. You know, has National lost touch with the regions, which was brought into focus last year with the Northland by-election?
Yes.
You know, is there too much focus on Auckland?
Yeah.
Now, of course, if you live in Auckland, you know that there isn't too much focus on Auckland. You know, if you're in an hour and a half commute every morning just to get a job so that you can spend 70% of your pay on your rent, you know that there's actually not being enough done in Auckland by government. But if you're out in the regions, you just see all of this spending and all of this focus. Now, that's actually something that's more similar to the kind of Trump effect, where you have this kind of rural-city divide and this idea that you're being neglected out in the hinterland. But yeah, look, I mean, Auckland is, is it over a third of the population now?
Something like that.
Super city, yeah.
And rising.
Yeah, and that is
higher now than when we started this podcast. We started. I mean, there several thousand people have flowed into Auckland since we began this podcast. It's been a long podcast.
I think that's and look, so of course, the place that is 33% of New Zealand is going to be a focus. The elections are won and lost up here, particularly because, you know, if Labour does well in Auckland, they can do well nationally. Speaking of the length of this podcast, let's wind it up. Does anyone? I also invited you
to come up with a Christmas wish, something you'd like from Santa's sack in politics for 2017. Has anyone had a moment to think about that?
I've got one. It's a little bit left field, but my one is that I would really like Annette Sykes to be in the next Parliament.
Okay.
Because I just think that it would be a really exciting, interesting, explosive Parliament to report on with her in it. And I think, if you had Annette Sykes with a Marama Fox, a Marama Davidson, and an Anaya Mahuta, that would be a force to reckon with.
Sure would. How close? She came reasonably close last time, did she?
She actually slipped back last time. The time before, she was the second highest. She closed the gap on her in Theodoro last time. Rawiri Wright actually came second in Waiariki. If Hone had got in, she would have got in. But unfortunately, he missed out, so we ended up with a pretty dry Parliament.
What would you like from Santa's sack?
Could I use my wish to cancel Annabelle's wish? Is that how this works? Or
neutralise,
yeah.
Dude, no, it doesn't work like that. Santa doesn't like that sort of stuff. That's like
You're
that's
getting
like
a lump of coal
that's
now,
like
Ben.
you want your sister's
You're on the naughty list.
I don't want my sister getting a Lego truck. So I'll have nothing, and she doesn't get her leg. That's not fair.
Look, I very much want Annabelle to be happy in the coming year, but there's got to be another way. Look, I want a boring year. I want a dull year without any apocalypse, without the end of days, without Ragnarok occurring.
Yeah,
that's my modest.
What occurring? What was
Ragnarok.
It? What's that?
That's the Scandinavian end of Twilight of the Gods.
Yeah.
It's like an Armageddon.
Yeah.
Is that a Norse thing?
The wolf Fenris finally devours the sun. John Key goes and lives in Hawaii permanently. I think we're about halfway through all of the stuff they described.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You just want to.
That's all. I just want a quiet life for all of us, Toby.
I just want to have a nice glass of milk and read a book. I want, since you asked, us to do election year without talking about stitch-ups or dirty boroughs and seats. Just let it happen. Like, that's the system. Yes. Let's not get bogged down. I just get bored by it.
I agree.
And I want to have no discussions about what Winston's bottom lines are. I just want to kind of like the media to agree, to have a pact, just to completely terrify him by not asking him about that, because then he just gets to pontificate about that and prevaricate about it for minutes and minutes. And so those are my wishes. You've been listening to the Spin-Off's Politics podcast, Gone by Lunchtime, and we're dropping our mics for the year. Many thanks to producers Joe Ho 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 Say Barbosa and Madeline Awayana Chapmanja, to Jingle Annabelle's Lee, I'll start it so I'll finish, to Ben Thomasilto, and goodbye from me, Toby Ding Dong Merrily on Manhire, and a very Merry Christmas, Chris Mooker, and Festivus to you, beloved listeners. We'll talk again in 2017. I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government. A podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards the
Most radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on The Spin-Off or wherever you get your podcasts.
Kia ora, I'm Alex Casey, Senior Writer at The Spin-Off. We wouldn't exist without the ongoing support of our generous members. If you're able to, you can make a donation at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
The Spin-Off Podcast Network.